And it's my understanding that this mound over in this direction is where a giant was found.
It was found in a big conical mound in 1881 is when Putnam did his work. And he was cut off at the knees and his hands were cut off. So did he have 6 fingers and 6 toes? That seems to be the idea. When people started looking at the work that was done and saying, wait a minute, there's alignments here. As far as archaeology goes, a lot of archaeologists look at those alignments and say it's happenstance, which is sad. But they don't believe what they're trying to feed you. Up there, drink the Kool-Aid, basically, but it's not like that.
Look at this sucker. Sure looks like a monolith to me.
What is going on, all my local guys and gals and long distance pals?
We are back.
We're back.
I thought you were going to start singing again. I've learned that.
Let's get it on.
Well, that or that. What was it that you were... There she goes. When you were at the everybody's busting up laughing.
Oh,
man.
Yeah. And I thought it was the Smashing Pumpkins. And I just can't contain.
Voice of an angel, I'll tell you.
I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Fallen.
The fallen angel, yeah. Oh, man.
Well, man, we had an adventure. I mean, the conference itself was an adventure.
Was.
But we had a pre-adventure.
A prehistoric adventure. How about that? Let's keep going with the pre's.
Mounds of fun.
Truly. Just piles and piles of fun.
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, we got to, you approached me about that a little ahead of time, said, hey, you know
ready?
what?
Let's go.
We're going to Ohio. There's mounds all over the place. The serpent mounds there. You had a couple of these things, and you said, let's figure out how we want to do this, and let's go a little early to the conference and stop by, hit a couple of mounds, get some footage. Let's look at some things, kind of, see for ourselves what this is all about, because we've heard about the mound builders for a long time. We've talked about them before. I think it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, seen lots of documentaries and film.
Mm-hmm.
But never been myself.
Well, and I'll be honest, after watching Justin film, I don't think any of those documentaries did it justice. So I'm just saying, I'm patting you on the back there, because it was pretty awesome. It's pretty amazing to be there. The drone footage Justin got was unreal. Just some of the stuff that we put together, it was just awesome. But first... we left a little early to go to the conference. We got up into that area in Ohio, like middle of the night on Thursday.
It was like midnight.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Slept a little bit, then got up and ran to Miamisburg. Right?
Yep.
And that mound was pretty spectacular. I mean, it was huge. It had a big stone staircase going up. It's in the middle of just an industrial park. There's a golf course over on one side, and there's just this gigantic mound of dirt, and you sit there and think about it. If you don't know anything about this, you would just think, oh, somebody dug out a pond and left it there or something. It just, you wouldn't even think twice about it. You'd walk right by it. But when you know what those were, how long ago that was probably, constructed, and the significance of it, that changes the game.
Yeah, and like you had said, it was just when I done the research for this too, I had Fritz Zimmerman's book, The Traveler's Guide, which I was lucky. I had Fritz on the show, and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I want to get all your books. Can I just get them from you, and you sign them for me? So I got all three of his books on the giants and the mounds, and he had signed them for me. And I had that idea. I'm like, man, if we're going to be in Ohio, there's tons and tons of mounds there. I got, this new camera and gimbal and drones. I want to check this stuff out and record. And I had heard about mounds. I had seen some documentaries from L.A. Marzulli and Fritz, but never been to one myself or actually, dug into them, And when I started going through that field guide, a lot of these just look like little hills or little bumps, stuff that we see in East Tennessee every day. And I'm like, dude, when I hear mound, I'm thinking of like a great pyramid of dirt. But most of them are not like that. But this one was huge. And the two that we actually seen, and it was awesome the way it worked out, because if we only had time to see two, these would be the two that we wanted to see, because they were the two largest mounds in Ohio. And both of them were within a half an hour of the conference. So that was amazing how that worked out.
Perfect. Reason we look into these almost more than anything else, the giants who ruled America.
Yeah, pull it back a little.
The ancient giants who ruled America. It says The Missing Skeletons and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up by Richard Dewhurst. This book is a phenomenal book, and we're going to go through a little bit of this here in a little bit. I have just some snippets, and they have a lot of old news clippings and things from starting in the 1800s and coming through into the 1900s of different mounds that were dug up and what they found.
Which, first thing I guess is impressions. We talked about when we pulled up on the Miamisburg Mound, it was just like, this huge thing that's like the size of the freaking pyramids of Giza in the middle of an industrial park. It sticks out like a sore thumb. But the Enon Mound is only 34 miles away.
But yeah, it's
from the
fascinating
Miamisburg
when
Mound.
you look into the mounds and the history.
So it's right there in vicinity.
The last video,
and it's very similar in size. This is the second largest canonical mound in Ohio, second to only the Miamisburg one. So when you pull it up on this one, it's very similar in size. But the number one thing that stuck out to me is you have this, basically this suburb or this subdivision, and there's houses all around this thing. This thing is like the centerpiece on your grandma's kitchen table. And you have just this roundabout that drives completely around this mound, and they got it fenced off. Of course, it's not like a prison fence. It's the old school post with the two pieces of log, like old school looking, just to deter people from getting on it. But you could easily jump the thing if you wanted to. But that just stood out to me. I was like, this is kind of cool. But at the same time, it's kind of creepy too, because this is a burial mound. So you're sitting on your front porch, smoking a cigar or sipping on some brandy, staring at potentially a pile of potential giant corpses.
To me, it's just, it sparks such a curiosity. But you brought this up when we were there. We were talking to a gentleman on top of the Miamisburg Mound. And then I think you brought it up when we were just talking or recording too as well. But when Lincoln was at Niagara Falls, and I actually took a clip of that speech, and I was just going to read that real quick if that's all right with you. But it says, and this is President Lincoln, 1848, campaigning for president, and on the way home to Illinois, he visited Niagara Falls and found the site so impressive that he started writing about it. And this is what it says. It calls up the infinite past when Columbus first sought this continent. when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came to the land of his maker. Now, as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now, contemporary with the whole race of men, and older than the first man. Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and mastodon, now so long dead that fragments of their monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived, have gazed on Niagara. But that part where it says, the eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America. Now, there's a lot of speculation when we talk about mounds and how many there were. There's reports that there was at least 1 million mounds in America back in the 1800s, but a lot of people say there's probably closer to 100,000 now in the country. But you got to remember, and we talked a little bit about this before, that some of those mounds literally might be 6 feet tall, and they're just a bump, and people wouldn't even think the fact that somebody built that 3,000 years ago or something of that nature. People wouldn't even think that. It's just a bump. So a lot of these probably get overlooked. You're good.
I was just going to say that they got these names because that's the land that they were found on. These were farmers, and that was their last names. And so they named them, after the farmers.
Well, Captain M.C. Hopewell of Ross County had more than 30 mounds within a 110-acre enclosure on his property, hence the Hopewell. And the Edina name came from the estate of Thomas Worthington, who was the governor of Ohio from 1814 to 1818. His estate name was Edina. And that's where these names for these peoples come from. So we don't even have the true, what they would even have called themselves. We don't have that trickle-down effect. But pretty cool to see that, there's some ancient history there. Now, I'm going to take us to, there was a thing in Iowa that was found back in the 1800s called the Davenport Stela. Have you heard of this? The Davenport Stela was really, really cool for multiple reasons. But first of all, there wasn't supposed to be written language at that time.
So is this the one in that ancient, the giants who ruled ancient America? Was that in that book?
It may have been. I'm trying to remember which book that was in. I have all this, and I'm trying to find the exact phrasing from what it had on there.
I read that book. I got it in my collection, but that sounds familiar. I just can't place it.
It might have been there, but I think it was in multiple books that I had, because that was a pretty big one. But that has, now I'm trying to, oh, here it is. The Davenport, they call it the Davenport Calendar Stela. It was found in a burial mound in Iowa in 1874. And it was written 3 different languages, which is really interesting. Egyptian, Iberian Punic, and Libyan. So we have something that was prior to when written language was supposed to be here, written in multiple different languages, and then you have Egyptian on there. And this isn't the only Egyptian artifact that they found here. There's talk about that in the Grand Canyon. They found Egyptian artifacts. There's talk of that in other, Phoenician artifacts, things of this nature that we see from cultures that definitely came here pre-Columbus. But a really interesting side note.
Barry Fale guy you just showed his book, trying to think of the name of it, America's Stonehenge. He found a stone there called the Baal Stone that was written in Phoenician, and it said, "To we the Canaanites dedicate this site to Baal of the Phoenicians." And Barry Fale from Harvard, he was the one that transcribed that.
And I think that's the one that's only 40 miles south of Plymouth Rock, if I'm correct. That's the one that they found literally, like, they almost landed exactly where the Pilgrims did way before the Pilgrims, which is just another thing that, and all these things get passed off as a hoax. One other interesting thing that I thought was just to show another tidbit of the fact that some of these people were here before, but Barry Fell says that the Micmac and Algonquin tribes, right? We have the Micmac and Algonquin. They're more northern into Canada, northern, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, into Canada, like through that range over to New York. They have a limited but recognizable Egyptian vocabulary. It says, which was not part of their native Algonquin language, but shows that they had contact with the Egyptian people.
Their online source said 2,133 truckloads of dirt in the Enon Mound. And that comes out to the equivalent. If someone on average could carry 40 pounds of soil at a time, on that average, this would be over 1 million human trips. And so, I mean, just wrap your head around that. But these, ancient people who were, no modern technology, they were chipping away with deer antlers, digging up soil, and using deer skin or whatever to wrap this, soil up with and carry and stack and pack in with their feet. Over 1 million trips to build the Enon Mound. And to me, that was just baffling to think about. But it was 574 feet in circumference with a height of 45 to 50 feet is what that source said. But the first recorded digging of the site, there was this quote in the book. It says, "We found topsoil all the way for 30 feet when we came to a cave of curious construction. It was in the shape of a bake oven, high enough for a man to stand upright in the center, and it tapered down on all sides. On one side was a door that at one time was the entrance from the ground level into the cave. In the center was a pile of dirt and a large stone resembling an altar, and on it were bones." It said that that the bones were so brittle that they wouldn't be able to stand moving them, so that the men carved their names and the date in the stone and then reburied the cave. And this was dated from 1870 to 1880 in Beer's History of Clark County. And then it says the 1900s, the mound was the center of a large dirt horse racing track. And that this was an 84-acre farm, and it was bought in 1952 and developed into Indian Mound Estates, and that the mound was preserved and given to the village of Enon.
That Davenport Stella, right? That had that information on it. But when that was actually transcribed or translated, the information indicates that a ray of light falls on a specific tone or a specific stone on the spring equinox. And what was that stone called? The Watcher. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Are we focusing back on who we're worshiping? Are we focusing back on a pre-flood event like you were just talking about? And I think that is an interesting correlation. And it could be a straight coincidence, but the fact that we hear the Watcher and we're talking about Semitic writings being found on here, that someone who was Semitic could have read that. Is this a precursor? Or not a precursor, but is this something pre even Book of Enoch, where they were told through the oral traditions about the Watchers. Were they venerating the Watchers?
Well, even in Newark, that
Newark,
circle, that circle and square mound. What do they call that?
I read all on that today, but I know what you're talking about.
But Fritz just recently discovered that the open gate that goes into that lines up perfect with the sunrise on what's the name of that festival? Oh, on Beltane. And this, they were sun worshippers, and on Beltane, which was a Phoenician holiday, worshiping their Phoenician god Baal, who they find the Baal stone in America's Stonehenge lines up perfectly on Beltane. So that shows you that, in the very least, had a very heavy Phoenician background or influence, whoever built that mound.
That's pretty crazy.
That's May 1st, I think. Is that right? Beltane?
I'm not sure. Now, piggybacking off what you just said, one more little rabbit trail, one more cool little thing is Frank Joseph was the editor-in-chief of that same ancient American magazine from 1993 to 2007. Cahokia, Monk's Mound, right? Monk's Mound, per Frank Joseph, had the same base as the Great Pyramid, and it was aligned to the same cardinal points. That's hard to, you may not, it's hard to say you didn't have influence with the Egyptians. It's hard to say you didn't have at least a connection with whoever showed the Egyptians these things. The same cosmology, the same knowledge, for lack of a better word, maybe some forbidden knowledge from, the
star people, as they call them.
The star people, as they call it, or as this stone was called, the Watcher. Just an interesting connection that I think we make, and we can see that correlation between the biblical and even the non-canonical when we talk about Enoch and bring that stuff in, that you can see that the answers are there. But I just think that that's a very interesting thing that I had never seen before.
Yeah, even the goods. Why else do you find corn in Egypt? Why do you find cocaine in Pharaoh's burial tombs? These are things found in South America originally that migrated north into North America. Why else are we finding 98.5% pure copper that is only found in Michigan, in Europe, in the Levant, in the Middle East? Because all these things were going back and forth in the ancient world. And I even heard an author speak one time connecting with the Bible, is Solomon. During the Feast of Tabernacles, he would accept tribute from all the different countries of the world. And it talks about this far-off land of Ophir, or Ophir. And I've heard this author, I can't remember who it was now, but I've heard people talk about it and stuff on YouTube, and they theorize that that could have very well been North America. Ophir.
It's, the connections are there. We obviously know that, and that's the hard part, and that's why they try to stick to that pre-Columbian narrative, saying that there's nothing there, because they say that no one could have there was no ships prior to that, there was no boats prior to that, which they've found, Egyptian. They found these some Egyptian ships. They found some things like this that were obviously prior to Columbus. But
hey guys, you found yourself at the end of the line, and this means that you're not an all-access pass holder. So I got to play the Gandalf here and slam it down and say, "You shall not pass." But hey, if you'd like to join us on the hero's journey and get the rest of this episode, and not only this episode, you get 48 hours early to every single episode in the future, and gain access to an entire library of members-only content, access to the private Facebook community, and monthly Q&As with authors and speakers and researchers that I've had on the show. Head on over to PrometheusLensPodcast.com and sign up. It's quick, it's easy, and I'm only asking you to sacrifice a happy meal once a month. You're without an excuse. Homeless people come up with $5 to $10 a day for their addictions. Nobody's that hard up. Torch is high, guys.